Our next presenter is Jacob Aronow. Jacob is a high school senior at Ransom Everglades in Miami, Florida. He was introduced to the world of vexillology through his studies in geography. But Jacob is an accomplished competitor and the most recent runner-up in the National Geography Bee. Joining NAVA finally gave him the inspiration to explore academically a topic he had previously observed only recreationally: unintentional flag similarity. Jacob, over to you.
All right, can everyone hear me okay? Is the microphone working? All right. Thank you so much, Stan, for that introduction. Really glad to be able to be here and present my research on flag doppelgangers, a study of unintentional vexillological resemblance. So I know some of you might be asking the question, what exactly is a flag doppelganger? And it's a fair question considering I made the term up. But I think in answer to that question, we first need to answer the question, what is a doppelganger? Now, a doppelganger is a German word. It literally means double goer, and its meaning is a ghostly apparition of one's living double. The most famous historical example of a doppelganger is actually Abraham Lincoln. As the story goes, the day after his victory in the 1860 election, he returned to his home in Springfield, Illinois, absolutely exhausted, and he collapsed on his bed. But he was woken up by a vision of himself in the mirror. He was 5 shades paler than his normal self. He looked weak and sickly. And when he told his wife about it, Mary Todd Lincoln, she said it was actually an omen, a sign he was going to be reelected in 1864, but that he wouldn't live to see the end of his second term. And of course, that is exactly what happened. Nowadays, the term doppelganger doesn't really carry those same negative connotations it used to carry. It used to mean a harbinger of sort of death or misfortune, but nowadays it can just be sort of a fun coincidence. As we can see, this gentleman in the bottom right isn't exactly sad to have found his doppelganger. He's quite happy, actually. And so we know humans can be doppelgangers, but the real question is, can flags? And of course, I wouldn't be giving this presentation if the answer to that wasn't yes, so here we are. So much like humans, flags, of course, can also have doppelgangers. And on the right here, I've put 2 pairs of flags to help illustrate that. One of them is a doppelganger, one of them isn't. On the left, we have Australia and New Zealand. On the right, we have Chad and Romania. Now, you might think that Australia and New Zealand are not the doppelgangers, and that is correct. But it's not because they don't look exactly alike. Even Chad and Romania have some subtle differences in the hue. Actually, it's because they come from the same place. Both Australia and New Zealand's flag derive from placing the Southern Cross on the British blue ensign to signify their position in the Southern Hemisphere, whereas the origins of the flags of Romania and Chad are wildly different, as we'll see later in the presentation. And so the key characteristic of a flag doppelganger is that it has unintentional resemblance. It resembles another flag, but not intentionally. And so in a sense, all flag doppelgangers are a violation of Rule 5 of good flag, bad flag, be distinctive or be related, kind of harkening back to Steve Knowlton's presentation earlier, which I found fascinating as well. Every flag doppelganger is not distinctive because there's another flag that looks exactly like it, but it's also not related because the key characteristic of doppelganger is that it's unintentional. So in order to make this concept a little bit more tractable, I've divided the doppelgangers into 2 distinct categories. We have direct doppelgangers and indirect doppelgangers. Now, the difference between direct and indirect is pretty simple. Direct look almost exactly the same with only very small differences, and in indirect, the differences are noticeable. Now, you might think that being an indirect doppelganger might disqualify it from being a doppelganger in general, but I would still classify indirect doppelgangers as doppelgangers because they, 1, share a dominant visual cue. As we can see here, both the old flag of Wales and the modern, or not the modern, but the last flag of the Qing dynasty both contain a dragon, and similar color schemes, both containing yellow. And so even if it doesn't look exactly alike, 2 flags can still be doppelgangers. So why should we study flag doppelgangers? I've seen a ton of studies about flag similarity, especially around the notion of flag families, like the Pan-Arab flags, the Pan-African flags, the Nordic Cross, and I've even seen computational studies which use machine learning to classify all the national flags, and I've put the result of that study on the right. But in my opinion, studying unintentional resemblances can actually reveal a lot more about human character. Because if you have 2 cultures on different continents across the world, which converge at the same designs, to me, that reveals a lot more into human psychology. Why do humans choose the flags they do? And so today, I'm going to present 8 case studies of flag doppelgangers, 4 direct and 4 indirect, and then I'm going to derive the 3 main mechanisms by which these flag doppelgangers arise. So without further ado, let's get into the case studies. Little note, I've tried to include case studies that I'd assume most of you might know. Not all of you might know, of course, and there are some really obscure ones, but just take that into account when we're going in. So let's start with the 4 case studies of direct doppelgangers. The first one is, of course, Haiti and Liechtenstein, and I see some of you are nodding and smiling as well. But on the left, we have the civil flag of Haiti, and on the right, we have the flag of Liechtenstein for 16 years at the beginning of the 20th century. Now, Haiti's flag didn't always look like this. Of course, when it was under French rule, the flag was just that of France. And the narrative goes, the story goes, that at the Congress of Arcahai in 1803, revolutionary leader Jean-Jacques Dessalines took the French flag, ripped out the white stripe, sewed the blue and red stripes together, and that's how the Haitian flag came to be. Now, this is a myth. Actually, it's not really how it happened, but it still is very relevant to Haitian popular memory, and it's why I'm mentioning it right now. Now, the flag of Liechtenstein comes from a completely different place. It comes from European princely livery. So back in the 19th century, it was customary for European countries to take the colors of their coat of arms and put them in the flag. So Liechtenstein's coat of arms were gold and red, so their flag was gold and red for a while. But in 1852, they decided to switch to a blue and red flag to match the livery colors of Prince Joseph Wenzel I. And so as a result, this is how we get two flags in completely different continents having the exact same design. And this wasn't really an issue for a while. In fact, they didn't really know of each other's existence in a time without the internet. And again, it wasn't really an issue until the 1936 Olympics, when they met each other at the opening ceremony and they saw each other's flags and they said, this is a problem. At the top, you can see Haitian weightlifter René Ambroise, the only athlete, and on the bottom, you can see the Liechtenstein athletes. And they came together and they said, yeah, we need to do something about this. And so temporarily for the Olympics, Liechtenstein decided to flip their flag upside down, placing the red on top and the blue on the bottom. And, you know, it works, I guess. It's decent. But of course, it's not a temporary solution. And so in the aftermath of the Olympics, Liechtenstein decided to place a crown in the top left of their flag, whereas Haiti started transitioning away from the civil flag and towards the national flag, which contains the coat of arms in the center. Interestingly, you'll notice that the coat of arms contains the civil flag in it. So, interesting. But yeah, that's our first case study over with. And now we can move on to Chad and Romania. So, of course, I think many of you have heard this before, but this was the flag of Romania before 1947. And in 1947, Romania became communist with under the leadership of Gheorghe Gheorghiu Dej. And he defaced the flag by adding an emblem right in the center, a communist emblem. And this is pretty normal. A regime change, with a regime change often comes a change in flag. But what Romania didn't expect is that during the time they had an emblem on their flag, Chad gained its independence from French Equatorial Africa, and it changed its flag from the colonial flag to a modified version of the French tricolor, with yellow rather than white in the middle. And yeah, this is the exact same as Romania's old flag, so you might imagine, after Romania was no longer communist, now they have basically the exact same flag. And this has caused some controversy as well, most notably in 2004, when Chadian officials asked the United Nations to consider the case of the flags and asked them to litigate over which country deserved to use it. Romania refused to give it up. They said the tricolor belongs to us, and that's sort of where we stand today. But, you know, we'll see if this changes anytime in the future. And once again, there's no copying here. There's no diffusion. It's just the inevitability of simple geometry and a limited color palette. So now we're going to move on to Monaco and Indonesia, much of the same of what I had before, so I'm going to try to go quick on this one. Monaco's red over white bicolor dates to 1881, and it's drawn from the heraldry of the House of Grimaldi. Indonesia's Sang Saka Merah Putih, as it's called, their national flag, comes from a different tradition. It comes from ancient Javanese symbolism, specifically during the Majapahit Empire, where red represented life and white represented purity. Now, when the two flags met at the International Hydrographic Conference in 1952, Monaco asked Indonesia if they'd be willing to change their flag. And Indonesia said no. So they decided to move the two countries to opposite sides of the room so that there wouldn't be any confusion. Eventually, both sides did actually compromise by codifying different proportions to their flag, Monaco's 4-5 and Indonesia's 2-3, which is a subtle difference that I think no one notices outside of this room and maybe a few others. Yeah, and this is another reminder that convergence is not always conflict. Sometimes it's just coincidence, or maybe just evidence that humans really like red and white. So now we're going to move on to the case study of Krakow and the Flaga Marina, or Marian flag of Poland. Now this one is really fascinating, really a lot more obscure than the first three. So the story starts in 1815 with the Free City of Krakow. So during the Free City of Krakow, the militiamen, the soldiers, would wear a blue and white uniform consisting of a blue kontus, or sort of like a coat-like garment, and a white zupan, which is sort of a stripe. You can see it in the image in the top left. And these colors became not an official, but sort of an unofficial symbol of the city. And people saw it as a patriotic way to represent themselves. And so they decided to put those colors on the flag. After its annexation by Austria in 1846, the locals kept using those same colors as a symbol of resistance. And after Austria relinquished control of Krakow, it became even more prominent and has since been in usage for almost 200 years continuously. But there was almost a problem. In the 1980s, a very, very, very similar flag started to be seen all across Poland. You'd be able to see it in front of churches during Marian feasts or processions, and no one really knew where it came from. It's this one that you see in the bottom right here. Until recently, when a 2017 study by Krzysztof Guzek discovered that it can be traced exactly back to 1979. So when Pope John Paul II visited Krakow on his pilgrimage, his homecoming pilgrimage to his home country of Poland, the city was decorated with white and blue flags. And people, observers out from outside of the city looking on, reinterpreted these symbols not as a symbol of Krakow, but actually as a symbol of Marians, of a symbol of Catholic tradition. And Krzysztof Guzek actually describes this as Vox Populi, Vox Dei. The people declared it to be Marian, and so it was. And actually in 1991, because the Marian flag became so widespread all throughout Poland, Krakow darkened the hue of the blue in its flag in order to make it distinct. Really why I find that it's one of the most fascinating cases of doppelgangers that exist. And so now we can move on to the indirect doppelganger cases. We're done with the 4 direct doppelganger cases. And the first one is going to be that of Norfolk Island, Lebanon, and New England. So as we can all see, all 3 of these flags contain trees on a white and green or red background. And the result is a striking visual similarity despite completely independent derivation. The tree on the flag of Norfolk Island is the Norfolk Island pine, or the Araucaria heterophylla. And this tree was first sighted on the island in 1774 by James Cook. And it became an important symbolic part of the island's identity and was therefore included on the flag's adoption in 1979. The flag of Lebanon, owing to its status as a national flag, is slightly more complex. The tree in the middle of the flag is the Lebanese cedar, or the Cedrus labani, a tree which has millennia-old resonance in the Levant, and it appears in Bronze Age and biblical sources as well as Ottoman-era insignia. During a Lebanese push for independence from France in 1943, the standing Lebanese government fixed the modern composition of the flag that foregrounded the cedar as a national symbol, likely aiming to legitimize their claims to independence by invoking such deep-rooted symbolism. New England has no official flag, but the version you see on the screen is the most widely used. It actually finds its origins in Puritan resistance to an English maritime symbol. So at the time, New England colonists were made to fly the British red ensign, which included the Union Jack and the canton in the top left. However, the Puritans viewed the inclusion of the St. George's Cross, which is within the Union Jack, as a papist symbol, and therefore refused to fly it. They replaced the cross with the eastern white pine, or the Pinus strobus, which is a tree central to regional trade, shipbuilding, and even some local Native American tribes like the Pennacook. And even though these 3 flags look similar, it's not that anyone copied anyone else, it's just that trees make good symbols. As Jose Tiago Berg notes in his 2013 paper, environmental motifs are globally recurring. Designers looking to evoke rootedness or longevity often find themselves sketching, well, trees. So now we're going to move on to our second case study, that of Baltiisk, Russia, and Nyon, Switzerland. And this one is also fascinating because these are 2 tiny towns in completely different regions of Europe, which have no genealogical linkage, yet they both converged on a red and blue stripe with a fish in the middle. A fish. I mean, how many flags have you seen like that? The flag of Baltiisk, Russia's westernmost city on the Baltic Sea, captures centuries of maritime heritage. Adopted officially in 2011, it reproduces the town's historic coat of arms, first granted in 1725 when Baltiisk was known by its Prussian name, Pilau. It shows a silver sturgeon crowned in gold swimming across a red field above blue waves. So the sturgeon was once abundant in the Baltic Sea, and it represents the lifeblood of the local fishing industry and the prosperity it brought to the town. And the crown above it recalls the royal charter that gave the town its rights, while the red and blue evoke the sea and the town's naval identity. By contrast, the flag of Nyon, a lakeside town in the Alps, reflects a very different history. Its design features a 16th century coat of arms recorded as early as 1546 and features, once again, a silver fish, specifically a pike, leaping across blue and red vertical bands. And the pike is, like the sturgeons found in the Baltic Sea, the pike is found in Lake Geneva, and it symbolizes the town's relationship to water, its fishing tradition, and its lakeside livelihood. And together, these flags show how communities separated by distance and culture can find shared inspiration in the natural world, which is one of the sources of how doppelgangers might form. So now we can move on to a more notable case study between Wales, the Qing dynasty, and a bunch of other dragon flags, which I've omitted here for clarity. So a different sort of kinship appears when we compare Wales and the Qing dynasty, both dragon flags, both fierce and majestic, and both separated by continents. Wales' golden dragon, the Iddreg Or, is not the modern flag of Wales, of course, that's the Iddreg Goch, but evolved from medieval and Tudor heraldry, while the Qing dragon emerged from imperial cosmology, a sinuous emblem of the emperor's mandate. Visually, they're close enough to confuse a casual observer, but semantically, they couldn't be further apart. The Welsh dragon symbolizes resistance and unity, whereas the Qing dragon represents celestial order. This creates a type of apparent kinship, the illusion of shared heritage where none exists. It's also one of the reasons dragon flags are so universally captivating. They tap into something archetypal, something that predates heraldry itself. And finally, our favorite, the case study of Minnesota, Somalia, Puntland, and Jubaland. And Puntland and Jubaland are two regions of Somalia. So when Minnesota unveiled its new flag in 2024, this wasn't actually the official flag. This was just a proposed design by Andrew Precker. It was a sleek, minimal design of blue, green, and white. But of course, social media immediately started comparing it to the flags of Puntland and Jubaland, which are Somali regions with similar color schemes and a central star. Now, this resemblance, of course, was not intentional. The Minnesota Commission worked from local imagery like the sky-tinted waters, the North Star, and the state's silhouette, but the visual echo ignited online claims that the flag was a Somali copy, which was a supposed concession to the state's large Somali American community. Reuters and NAVA, of course, fact-checked this and found it to be false, but the damage was done, and the conspiracy was already out there. And now what makes this case fascinating is that the controversy arose not because the flags were identical, but because people thought they were, and projected meaning onto that resemblance. In other words, an indirect doppelganger caused the same level of political tension as a direct one. If the Haiti-Liechtenstein story was comedy, this one was politics, a reminder that flags remain deeply entangled with identity and perception. So now let's get into the analysis. Across all these cases, we can come away with several takeaways. First, direct doppelgangers almost always stem from simple designs. Bicolors, tricolors may be straightforward divisions, but that simplicity isn't random. It reflects the structural constraints of flag design. If you have only a few colors to work with or a few basic designs to work with, in the case of bicolors and tricolors, of course, you're bound to have repeats. Second, visibility itself magnifies consequence. Flags that meet in highly public venues like the Olympics or social media are more likely to provoke reaction. And third, context determines meaning. A duplicate design can be benign in one setting, confusing in another, and outright explosive when national or religious symbolism is involved. And so from these patterns, we can generalize three main mechanisms by which doppelgangers may arise. The first one is external inspirations, nature, geography, and landscape. So trees, mountains, rivers, and skies, these recur because they're everywhere. As Berg, as I mentioned earlier, Jose Tiago Berg observed, environmental determinism produces convergent iconography. You don't need to know Lebanon exists to draw a cedar if you're living among pines. And the second mechanism is mechanism B, which is shared cultural or religious archetypes despite not coming from the exact same place. Symbols like dragons, crosses, or stars have deep mythic resonance beyond a single cultural tradition. They arise independently because they fulfill similar symbolic needs. As Annie Pladoff and Steve Knowlton remind us in their landmark 2018 paper, Old Flags, New Meanings, symbols are not fixed. They can migrate, mutate, and reappear. And the final one is mechanism C, which is the one I mentioned earlier. Flags, again, draw from a remarkably small palette of acceptable designs and colors, and so they're bound to reappear somewhere. Now, all of that taking into consideration, what does this mean? What does this tell us about flags? What do doppelgangers tell us about human culture? Doppelgangers remind us that flags are not isolated emblems. They are nodes in a global semiotic network, mirrors of our shared imagination. When two designs align across continents, it's not necessarily theft or coincidence. It's often evidence of common visual logic, a kind of parallel evolution in symbolism. They also reveal the limits of vexillological singularity. We like to think that every flag is unique, but perhaps, inevitably, some aren't. And maybe that's not a flaw, but a feature of how meaning works. Finally, flag doppelgangers show that even small visual overlaps can have large symbolic consequences. Whether at an Olympic ceremony in 1936 or a Twitter thread in 2024, these moments remind us that people care deeply, sometimes a little too deeply maybe, about what their flags resemble rather than what they are. As for the future of this research, there's plenty of work to be done, especially exploring more flags, expanding the doppelganger corpus with a number of examples, as well as maybe some computational modeling, which I mentioned earlier, machine learning, deep learning, other pathways forward. I am interested in computer science, so maybe that's one path I could take in the future. But if anything, flag doppelgangers prove that even in the search for difference, we can't help but echo each other. Thank you.
Not so much a question, but I have been thinking about this for some time now, about flag doppelgangers. I couldn't help but notice the resemblance between the state flag of Nigeria and the former national flag of Rhodesia. I don't know if you've seen the state flag of Nigeria, but I've also thought about Somalia and the Bonnie Blue flag, which was flown by the Confederacy.
Interesting. Yeah.
So
That was-
just wanted to bring that up.
Of course, more cases we could explore in the future. Always great.
Thank you very much. Really delightful. I'm curious about that computational model. How could we how could we get access to that?
Yeah, so I can go back to the slide here. This was just a paper I read a while ago. I don't remember the exact details of it, but oh, wow, it's a lot of slides ago. Essentially, he took.
No, where can we find?
Oh, where can you find the paper?
Yeah.
Oh, it's on some journal. I can send it to you after if you'd like. I didn't
you.
put the citation in here, but it's included in my research paper.
With the expansion or adoption of the good flag, bad flag principles and the move to make simplified flags, do you think there's going to be a lot more doppelgangers? Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Absolutely. There will be a lot more doppelgangers. And that's sort of what Steve Knowlton was hinting at in his presentation. When I saw the title of his presentation, Be Distinctive or Be Related, I was like, man, I hope we're not presenting about the same thing. But thankfully, we took a different direction. But yeah, absolutely. I do think there will be more doppelgangers in the future because of the sort of simple aesthetic that we're taking. And again, I don't think flag doppelgangers are necessarily a bad thing. Again, I think they reveal some fundamental human tendencies and they're really important to analyze. But I do think they will become more common in the future.
Time for one more question. Oh, you.
I actually have a question from our chat from Pamela Worthington. She loved your presentation. She wanted to know what research tools did you use to find these doppelgangers?
That's a good question. So I had known about a few of the case studies before, Romania and Chad, Haiti and Liechtenstein, some of the national ones. Otherwise, I was basically just using CRW's Flag of the World, just going through and looking at similar flags, as well as Google reverse image search was real help there. And of course, AI tools can be really helpful nowadays. Sometimes I would ask ChatGPT, like, oh, can you find these specific flags? Can you go in and do this? It wasn't very good at it, but I think it found one specific example. It found the Norfolk Island, Lebanon, New England case, which is useful. So,
thank you. Great presentation. If you're going to computer science, do you think you can find a way to quantify doppelganging? Because otherwise, your limit may be different from mine, might be different from the next person's as to what qualifies as a doppelganger and what is an almost identical. But if you can quantify it somehow, whether by definition or by numerics like area and some degree of similarity, I believe there's some software to do that for visual copyrights. Right, if you can find a way to do that, that may make it more definitive.
Yeah,
your results.
Yeah, I was actually looking into that a little bit at the beginning. I determined that I didn't really have the tools at the time to be able to do that, but color masking was a way we could do that. There are ways. I definitely agree. Maybe I could work with Greg on that. Not sure, but yeah.